Imagine growing up a Mormon from a baby, a wee lad, to your young adult years, and just leaving the church. Well, today I'm going to be interviewing someone who has gone through that. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there.
Thanks for coming on my podcast today. Glad to finally get to know you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
First, let's start with the questions. First, how about you tell me about your background with the Mormon church, and like how did you get into that?
So, my parents raised me in the church. So, I guess by the time I was a baby to 5 years old, I don't really remember much of it, but they took me to church all the time. They blessed me when I was a little baby. So, it was around 8 years old that they were like, all right, it's time for you to get baptized into the church and become a member. And basically, they act like the church in general acts like, oh, it's a choice when you turn 8. That's the age of accountability. You want to join, so you want to get baptized.
Mhm.
And so they tell you that's what you want. And then you're like, yeah, that's what I want. Let's do it. And I got baptized at 8. Then they start talking about like the priesthood authority, the Aaronic priesthood, and then the Melchizedek priesthood. So when you're 12, you get the lower priesthood power, and then you pass the sacrament. So the bread and the water, you're passing it when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. When you're 16, you're like saying the prayer, like blessing the sacrament. And then by 19, I was going on a mission to Taiwan for the church.
Oh, what was that like?
I thought it was a good experience.
Oh,
I went to Taiwan on my mission. So even though I'm no longer a member of the church, I thought that was at least a very good experience to have in my life, like doing something
uh,
cool for my
sorry.
life. No, you go ahead.
How long did you practice Mormonism for?
I probably left the church. I kind of still went to church into my 20s. So around 25, 26 probably is when I was like, okay, I no longer can like go to church because some of my life's viewpoints were straying from the viewpoints of the church, and so it just wasn't a fit anymore. I would like even go to the pastors. They call them bishops. They're kind of the ones in charge of
Yeah.
running each congregation. So the bishop was like, I don't know where you fit in. I'm like, I don't know where I fit in. And so we basically were like, all right, bye.
So you just kind of left from there. What made you basically this like was it just not fitting in, or was there another meaning for wanting to leave?
So the real reason that I didn't quite fit in and I probably needed to leave was because I'm gay, and I guess I didn't know that when I was growing up. It took a while to come out to myself, come out to family members and friends. And so at the very last few years of attending church, people knew I was gay. And so it was kind of this will he, won't he not practice homosexuality to be able to go to church? And so for a while I could, but then in the long run, I was like, to be happy, I don't feel comfortable marrying someone of the opposite sex. I don't want to date women. And that's kind of what you have to do when you're in the church. It's like you get baptized, go on a mission, get married in the temple to a woman, and keep going up and up in church callings and different things. And so that's kind of where the progression of the church halted. I was like, I don't think it's going to happen, guys.
Yeah, no, understandable completely. What would you say your typical day when attending church was like?
So they've since changed the hours that you have to go to church after I left, but for years and years and years and years, it was always a 3 hour session of church where either hour one or hour three, depending on where you lived, was going to be sacrament meeting, which I kind of explained to you was where the young men of the congregation or ward pass the bread and water and they say the blessing on it. And that's the quote unquote
Yeah,
most important part of the meeting. But then, of course, that was where you got your sermons or your talks. It would be the bishop or even higher level leaders who were kind of presiding over it. And they're like, welcome to Sunday. Welcome to church. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have Sister so and so give the prayer. They give the opening prayer. We do the sacrament. Then they have a couple people assigned to give talks, and the talks were basically on any gospel topic. Like it could be about temple service, it could be about scripture study, it could be about, like, especially during holidays, it was going to be about, oh, the birth of Jesus or the death of Jesus or the resurrection of Jesus. And so you would basically get an hour's worth of people talking, and then once a month they would invite whoever wanted to go up there to speak, which that kind of got out of hand a little bit, a little unhinged sometimes,
people
because they're
would people
supposed to
just
bear
so,
testimony. Yeah. They're supposed to bear testimony, but they sometimes were just bearing like storytelling. Like, well, yesterday we
yeah,
didn't have any eggs in the fridge, and you're like, oh my goodness, we're listening about the eggs.
yeah. What would you say you before you did leave? Would you say you enjoyed it there, or did you or you just always just there
I
like your
used to
family made you?
enjoy, right. I think it starts as your family makes you go to church, but some of the aspects I enjoyed about being a part of that particular religion was the community, the social constructs of like having built-in friends that were your age. So after sacrament meeting, you would go to different Sunday school, and the boys and girls would split up for the third hour. So you would hang out with people your age, and so you had built-in friends that also went to school with you for the most part. So I think it gave you a community, and then also they would have us as young men and young women attend Wednesday night activities, so we could be playing games, whether it be basketball or like, oh, we're going to film movies this week, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going on a field trip. So you would have built-in hangout sessions with your friends and church mates. And so that part I really enjoyed. I also enjoyed singing the hymns. So they had a lot of musical numbers besides just an opening hymn, like a mid-session hymn and a closing hymn. They would often invite people up to sing or play an instrument, and you would get extra musical selections, special musical numbers, they called them. And so I loved singing and hearing the beautiful music. So that was special as well. So I did, for the most part, enjoy it. In fact, when I stopped kind of believing in the church, I would still go because I could see all my friends at church and talk to them and kind of write notes back and forth while I'm half listening to the lessons. And not all the lessons were bad. Like, for the most part,
Yeah,
it's what you would do at any church, like, oh, be good to your fellow human beings, etc.
yeah, yeah. What while growing up in the church, what was the craziest thing you would have you experienced? Like anyone say, or like what was the craziest thing, or any funny memories that you can say whatever you want?
There were some like emotional like times where I remember for certain service projects you would help
Yeah,
people in the community. And one Christmas we helped this single mother because she didn't have any money, and we were young, so we were very impressionable, and we brought her a Christmas tree and presents for her kids, and she was crying and crying and crying. So that was a good emotional moment in the church where I was like, oh my gosh, helping people feels good. I'm sure there's funnier stories like, oh, we also, not to mention when I said all the different church services we could go to before school, every day we had to go to the church and have a seminary class before school. So 5 days a week, not only are we attending our regular high school, which is next door to the church building that I went to,
Yeah.
we did classes every day. So that was fun. And then sometimes we would quote unquote break into the church so we could film a movie. I don't know if you get the idea that we loved filming little videos back then. And this was before
No, I
cell
love.
phone cameras. So we just have like big camcorders that we're, yeah, filming with, and we're
No,
like
yeah, I love to film too.
making movies. So, oh, good. Yeah. It's really fun to film little skits and sketches
Yeah.
and movies. And some of them were funny and some of them were dramatic. But yeah, we would like put tape over the door so later we could go back to the church building and use it as a movie set. So that was kind of scandalous.
What were the classes for? Like, before before class itself. What were the church classes for?
They basically called it seminary. So it's almost like if we were going to a church high school, they would teach us,
Mhm.
each year was a different book of scripture. So one year it would be Old Testament, one year it would be New Testament, then it would be the Book of Mormon, and then it would be the Doctrine and Covenants, and that would kind of get you a deep dive into each of the Mormon scriptures that we studied. And so basically by the end of it you get a certificate that says you are well versed in scripture, and it kind of is like what would give us almost clout to be like, oh, we're ministers now, at least not as professionally as like pastors in other churches, but basically it's the same idea. They're like, oh, you did your church school for 4 high school years, so now you're well versed in all of those books.
Yeah. How did your family react to you leaving the church when you did?
That's a great question. They at first were not too keen on it. They weren't too happy. They ended up not really staying in the church themselves, but for the most part, they're like, oh,
Oh, they
we're still
didn't.
believing, though. We still believe in the church. And so it kind of hurt that one of their kids was leaving. I think now, since they don't really attend, they're not as upset about it. But at the time, they were like scary because the church does teach that you need to keep going to church and be together as a family. Otherwise, maybe in the next life, you won't be reunited together. So there's a lot of interesting gospel topics that kind of scare you into thinking you can never stop going to church. But once you stop going to church, you kind of get in the pattern of it and you're like, it's not bad going shopping on Sunday or going out or not having to go to all
Yeah.
these meetings. And I think that's why I told you earlier that they cut the meeting schedule down from 3 hours to 2 hours because I think they were losing a lot of people.
When you were dating your now so husband, were they
Good
conservative?
question again. At first, we started dating when I was in college at Virginia. And so when I was in Virginia and dating my boyfriend at the time, we kind of kept it on the down low, especially we were attending a school that was conservative as well and kind of religious. So we kind of had to also hide it from them. We would be like, oh no, we're just good friends. So when it was time to graduate, that's when I decided to tell my parents that, hey, I've been dating this person for a while now, and this is who they are, and this is the situation. We're gay and we're dating, even though they kind of knew I was gay, but they didn't think I was quote unquote practicing. So that was kind of the revelation of, hey, it's not going to work out for me to not date anyone or date just girls. So here's my boyfriend. And my mom at first took it hard. Mainly she was thinking, oh, living a gay lifestyle is really tough in the world, especially throughout the years. Like it gets easier through time, but at the same time, it's still hard. And so
Yeah,
she was worried for me. So I think she was upset in that respect. And then my dad was okay with it, but just surprised. And then basically through the years, they calmed down and they're like, okay, it's okay. It's more normal. It's more accepting. It's okay. So they were a little freaked out and a little scared. And it was a surprise. It was a little bit of a shock. But as the time goes on, it's fine now. They're more used to it.
yeah. And your friendships with your family and friends were lost or gained, well, after or losing faith with Mormonism.
That's another great question. Typically, one who leaves the church would lose some of their friends and family, like support or just being able to have opportunity to hang out with them. Luckily, for the most part, I keep in touch with everybody who was my friend back then, growing up, all the way to college. I keep in touch with a lot of them, and I'm still very close with a handful of them. So no one outright, in my opinion, like threw in the towel with me as a friend. They're still friendly, and we still communicate through Facebook and email and texting. So
Yeah,
not that I see everyone that I grew up with, but I
it
think I
hasn't
didn't
changed that much.
actually super lose anybody. Yeah. Yeah, I keep in
Oh,
touch.
oh.
But I was
So,
lucky. I think it does happen though.
oh. So you say you got it pretty easy, like not easy, but it wasn't like hard after that. It wasn't like a big.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I feel like I had it better, and it might be just my personality, because if someone did have a problem with me, or if someone was on Facebook speaking out against gay people, I'd be like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm gay and we're friends and you don't have to judge gay people because you know one,
yeah,
and I'm a nice person." And I think just that kind of personality that I have, where I'm like, I'm happy go lucky, I'm a outgoing person that you know and trust. You don't have to disown me or devalue me. And so I think they're like, oh, okay. So they're thinking about it now. They're like, okay, I do have a gay friend and he's not that bad.
yeah. Did your perspective on religion altogether change after leaving the church? If you don't mind me asking, like, what do you believe in now?
Okay, so the church will teach you. So if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints or the Mormons, they will teach you it's the only true church on the face of the earth. It's the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, as if Jesus came back and gave us his religion. So they basically are training me and all the other members to say and think, "Oh, this is the only true church and no other church is true."
Yeah,
So once you kind of realize that the church isn't that, you're like, oh, but they also told me that no other churches were true. So it kind of like crumbles the whole faith in general, the whole foundation of Christianity, because they taught you we're the only true church of Christ. And then once you find out that one wasn't even true, then you're like, oh, they're probably all not true. So that's kind of where we get left off. That's where I kind of left off, where it's not like I'm going to say, I know that religion is all false, but I kind of have that belief because they were teaching me they're not true. And then I found out, oh, also Mormons aren't true. Oh, so no one's true. And so I'm more agnostic than anything, not necessarily atheist, but to to think of life's purpose, I'm
you're
not
questioning.
necessarily reaching out. Yeah, I'm not going to the Bible and figuring it out. Other than the teachings that are good from the Bible, go ahead and use those, but I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to drink coffee and tea. I'm not going to drink alcohol. I'm not going to do, I'm going to be a little bit more liberal with my life and then find meaning in other things, not necessarily religion.
You're acting. You told me you're an actor. What time? What age did you start acting? Was it in college or?
I did a lot of acting in college. That's where I did the most. I started the interest of acting, I think, when I was in elementary school, but then I took a theater class, a drama class in junior high school, and then in high school pursued it more. But mostly in college is where I did the brunt of my studies and being in plays and musicals. So yeah, I think it was just a gradual interest through the years, and then my opportunities really soared in college.
Yeah. Uh, what would you say pursued your inspired you to pursue acting?
It might have been at first watching television and movies where I was excited, like when Macaulay Culkin was in Home Alone. I was like, "Oh my gosh, a kid can be an actor." So at the time, I was a kid, and I was thinking, "Oh, I could be an actor too."
Yeah,
And then in junior high school, they took us to theater plays for field trips. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. They're on stage. That's awesome." And then through high school and college, just watching shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where they're doing improv comedy on TV and they're actors and they do live shows. I was like, okay, this is really fun. So I studied improv, I studied musical theater because when I was younger, I listened to a lot of Judy Garland music, and she's very show tunes, Broadway, and Liza Minnelli, etc. And so then I really got into going to see musicals because the college I went to would perform a bunch, and then I'd try to audition and get in to some of them. And so I was really inspired just watching other theater performers and being friends with them, and the improv troupe on my campus, the actors in the musicals. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are famous. When really they're just students, but I was just like, ah, I love it. And so I started to pursue
yeah,
that more and more. And then when I transferred to Virginia, I got to be in tons of plays, and it was really fulfilling.
yeah. How can you describe a time? Is there any times in your acting in the acting time of your life where you had to overcome uh difficult obstacles through the career?
I think, like, when I was in a Shakespeare play, that was really tough for me because some actors really lean towards Shakespearean theater and
Yeah,
classical theater like that, but that was not my forte, not my best type of theater to perform, or that was easy for me. And so I do remember when I did do a Shakespeare play, having to study the lines and review and study and practice because the wording is not as easy as modern language. It had, the genius of
yeah,
Shakespeare's writing is it's kind of poetic and special, but also I felt like that made it harder. And so I remember there was hours of studying Shakespeare lines that was kind of stressful, and I had to overcome that difficulty, but it was worth it. It was fun in the end. I think now, if I had to do a Shakespeare play years later, I could probably do better than I did before.
yeah. What do you remember what character you played in Shakespeare? Just curious.
Yeah, I was the porter in Macbeth,
Oh,
and in doing that type of play, a lot of us had multiple characters. So I was King Duncan at first,
yeah,
then the porter, which was a more comedic role. So I did that one better than the more serious Shakespearean roles. And then I was a doctor and I was a henchman in the whole play. And so I think the porter was my main role, but I had these other roles that I had to learn too.
yeah. Do you have any secrets to memorizing your lines?
It's different for everybody. What seemed to help me is if you have a reader, someone else with the script that's giving you your cue line, and then you say the line, and then they're like, okay, that was right or that was wrong. Then they give you the cue line, and you go back and forth, and just repetition. a lot of times it just helped me going through the blocking with my scene partner on the stage or rehearsal space and just going through it over and over and over again. So the repetition helps. Some people, and I've done this before too, just get a recording of their lines and listen to it over and over. That helps. Yeah, but I think the secret for
Yeah.
me is just repetition, which may not be exciting, but it does lock it in your brain a little better.
What does repetition mean? If
Repeat and repeat and repeat. That way it kind of gets stuck in your brain.
okay, yeah, that makes so. That's how I usually do it. But yeah, it's a good way of doing it. Do you, is there any way you like to handle criticism or both constructive and negative about your performances?
I believe personally it's hard sometimes to get the critiques, especially if the person like the director or someone who is giving you the criticism is like, "Oh, do this, do that." And you're like, "Really? Do I have to do that?" So it kind of hurts your pride a little bit. It hurts your feelings. So I've learned that maybe don't take it too personally would be a good way to go about it. Just let it roll off your back. Because at times you're putting a lot into it and then it feels like they're putting you down. But if you just remember, they're not putting me down. Like I remember when we were doing Spring Awakening and we were doing it in an outdoor theater. And so the director was like, Richard, keep going back. And literally, when we were going back, we were going up a
Yeah,
hill, almost like a mountain, a little, a little hill in the background. Yeah, oh, keep going up, up stage, up, up. I'm like, can you really see me from up here? I just felt like, oh no, they're just putting me so far up. But I didn't realize the director's vision because they took a little video or picture of it later, and us being in this configuration on the hill with our lanterns really looked beautiful. And so even though I felt kind of on the spot, oh, keep going back, Richard, go further, further back, I was like, oh, they just want me in the background, they don't care about me. But then I realized the vision was beautiful. So sometimes you don't know what the director's vision is, so when they give you a note, it truly isn't personal. It's just making the picture, making the play look better.
yeah, I'll keep that in mind next time I do a play. Have you ever role if have you ever turned down any roles for acting gigs?
The closest I think I came to like turning down a role was also back in college. They were doing these like director scenes for a class. And so
Yeah,
everyone who was in the directing class would like cast people to be in their scenes. And I remember being in one and I just had no time because it was finals and it was homework and it was responsibility and pressure and it wasn't going well for me. And so it's like, yes, I wanted to be in a director's scene, but I was studying and trying to do all this other stuff and trying to memorize the lines. And then finally I was like, I have a friend who could take my place, but I just can't do this anymore. So it's not necessarily like I turned down a role, but I kind of quit doing a role. And
yeah,
so it was hard because I don't like to do that. I don't love to be irresponsible. But at that point, I was like, to be responsible is to be irresponsible for their scene. But I did try to find a replacement, so hopefully they weren't as mad.
yeah. When thinking of acting when you get like real world jobs and all that, do you ever think about money? Because it's gotta take a while to. You know, I'm not trying to like hurt. I'm not trying to hate on you. I'm just saying it takes a while to make money and all that.
Oh, for sure. I I think about it. I have a good friend who only does acting as their career, and it is a hustle. And so I think Yeah, I have one job now that is technically paid acting. It's not that much unless you get the special
Yeah.
performances, then it kind of gets a little bit more lucrative. You're doing it more because you love it. So the flip side is, can you turn what you love into a career? And my friend does a great job, and I think they do it by going out and auditioning every season and going for the roles that at least have payment, like they're paid acting gigs every time they're auditioning. So that's a plus in their favor. So if they land a role, at least they're getting compensated. But they'll stack, June, July, I'm in a show. August to September, I'm in a show, and they're paying. And oh, this gig, I'm going to New York for a minute to be pursuing this opportunity that will give me more roles. So they schedule it out pretty well, and then they do some commercial shoots that get paid, like local commercials to national commercials, photo shoots for like modeling different things. So any gig that they're doing is adding to that pot of the acting fund. And so I think that's the way you have to do it. Unfortunately, like I said, it's a hustle, it's a grind. And so yeah, you do love what you're doing, but you kind of have to chase the paid performing opportunities.
Yeah. Do you ever approach any of your characters in a certain way since you've left the Mormon Church?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I was still in Virginia, like transitioning out of the church, it was giving me a little bit of acting fodder where it gave me inspiration rather to dig deep emotionally into certain characters. Yeah, so I think if you're kind of playing the part of someone who's a goody two shoes church going person, and then you realize you don't have to be that way, it gives you a little bit more to work with. You could be a
Yeah.
villain a little easier. You can portray evil with less a little less inhibition.
What do you mean by like evil and a villain? Like, you consider yourself that, or like, what do you mean by that?
That you can tap into that part of yourself, because maybe in the church you would feel like, oh no, I want to be good and I want to not portray
Oh,
bad
okay.
things. And then when you're out of the church, you're like, no, I can swear, I can be bad, I can.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, not to bring up too much pop culture, but JoJo Siwa, she's bad
Yeah.
now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Obviously. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Totally. Do you think your past kind of is a good way to kind of help you with like roles, or like how you are, like you determine yourself to be?
Yeah, I think it definitely contributes to who who I am as a performer, because if you could put yourself into the character. I do remember, this is going to be funny, when I was transitioning out of the church, I was performing in a play reading of Angels in America, which two of the characters are a couple in the Mormon church. And so I really could put myself into that character because I knew what being in the church was like. And so my friend and I both were Mormon-ish at the time, and we were playing husband and wife, but the husband was gay. I'm like, oh, wow, this is me. So, not to mention putting yourself and your experiences into the
Yeah.
character, that one almost seemed so parallel to my life that I got it, and I could muster up the tears and the emotion because it felt pretty real. So, yeah, everything in your experience you could apply to the role, and usually you have to say, oh, well, my my childhood pet passed away, so I can understand this script because they had an animal or friend or something happened where there was death, and so you kind of tap into those emotions.
Mhm.
This one was exactly the same. It was Mormon, gay, leaving the church,
So
etc. I
you're
was like, oh,
literally,
I could do this one. Literally
so you're
the same,
literally,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know said that it was pretty good leaving out of the church. Your parents weren't mad at you for the most part. You know, it was even the pastor said you should probably leave. But were there any memories of the Mormon community kind of giving you backlash?
I know that when I was going to a church school, so before I transferred to Virginia, I was going to school in Idaho, and it was a school owned by the church. So that's where I got most of the backlash was through those members, those leaders of the school, because they are the ones who kicked me out of school because I was gay. They were like, "You're out." And then I was in a play as well. So 3 months after getting kicked out of school, we were putting on this play, Children of Eden, and they were like, "Wait a minute, those are the two guys that we kicked out of the school. Why? What are they doing in the play?" So after we started performing the play like 7 times, we still had like 5 more to go. They're like, they're kicked out of the play, and that was worse. That's when everyone was like, rumor mill. Oh, these are bad people. They got kicked out of the play. They're not students anymore. And I was like, you probably shouldn't have kicked us out of the play. It really put a scarlet letter on our
Yeah,
backs, our fronts. They're like, these are bad people. So yeah, that's where I felt persecuted the most was through the school church people, not necessarily the church people in my other life.
yeah. Were you upset when that happened? Like, were you upset? Like, are you currently still upset? Like that when they kicked you out of the
I
play, or
was devastated. Yeah, I was devastated at the time for getting kicked out of the play because I felt like that was even worse than getting kicked out of school. And we were doing such a good job in the play, and even the head of the theater department was like, it would be a bad move if the school decided to kick you out of the play because it'd be easier just to run the course of the play and then say, don't do the next play or something. But they decided that since we got kicked out of school, we couldn't be in the play, even though other community members that weren't students got to be in the play. So we felt like we were being even persecuted to a different level than everyone else because it's like, why can this high school boy who's not in college do the play, or this girl who graduated, she came back and she could be in the play, or these adults that are older can be in the play, but we've been kicked out of BYU Idaho at the time and we couldn't do the play. And so yeah, we were devastated, we cried, we mourned, but I'm over it now. It's a funny story kind of now because
yeah,
I'm like, they're just stupid to do that. It was dumb, and they had to cancel performance to rework it without my friend and I in the play because we got kicked out.
yeah. Are there and is there any dream roles that you hope one day you do get?
There are so many dream roles. I think any part in a Sondheim production, Stephen Sondheim wrote many a musical, Into the Woods, Company, Merrily We Roll Along. There's so many, Sweeney Todd.
Yeah,
Any of those shows would be a joy and a pleasure to be a part of because Sondheim is complicated when it comes to the musicality of it all, and the lyrics are tricky, but they're really fun and really rewarding to sing. Like I just saw Merrily We Roll Along on Broadway with Daniel Radcliffe,
yeah,
Lindsay
that's a
Mendez,
good
and
one.
Jonathan Groff. Oh, so good. And they blew my socks off. So if I could be in Merrily We Roll Along someday, even if it's a community production, I would totally do that because it's one of my favorites. So any Sondheim show, there's a few others that would be amazing to be in too. I always love. I was in The Wizard of Oz. That was a dream role where I
Oh,
got to play the scarecrow in college. So growing up, that was one of my favorite musicals. So I got to be in that one already. But I would totally do them again and again because they're so fun.
that role does fit you. Just by just about the way
Thanks.
you look.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm I'm
yeah. Oh, you can go if you want to say.
I'm tall. I'm lanky. It's like
Yeah,
I don't have a spine sometimes. Yeah.
yeah. Are there any elements from the past of the Mormon culture that you still represent in your daily life, or like your habits at work?
Like I kind of mentioned earlier, the whole being good to your fellow human beings was probably the strongest teaching of the church,
Mm,
and probably, yeah, probably a teaching you can glean from any church is just to be good to people and serve others and be kind. And I know sometimes with life it's hard to be kind because people can be right rude, they
yeah,
can be mean. And so it's hard to follow that up with kindness, but I find that trying your best to being good to your fellow human beings is a good thing. So that was the one teaching that I probably take with me because they did teach that. And a lot of people, for better or worse, when they think about their friends that were Mormon or are Mormon, they're like, they're really nice people. And I think that's a good reputation to have. So I'll take that reputation with me. I'll try to be a good, nice person. Obviously, the other things I don't want to take with me are to be judgmental. I feel like even though they say don't judge, a lot of Christians and Mormons and people of religion are like, "Oh, don't judge," but then they're the ones judging. So that would be one that I would kind of tweak and be like, "I really don't want to judge. I don't want to pretend."
yeah. Just other than it's a good it teaches to be good and all that. Do you believe Mormonism is a cult?
Technically, yeah, I do believe it's at least culty. You know how, yeah, the more extreme cults are usually fundamentalist Mormons, to be honest, but it does spawn from the proper church, like the proper Mormon LDS church. So I get the cult reputation. I felt like it is a little culty because of the indoctrination. I told you a little bit about growing up and how it's like you will join the church when you're 8 and you're going to choose that path for yourself. But I'm like, am I really choosing or did you tell me to choose? Even though it's kind of light in the mainstream Mormon religion, it's a light cult, and they make you go to all the meetings and they make you feel certain ways about certain things. Like way back in 2008, it was the whole Proposition 8 where they were like, the Mormon church is going to fund this bill in California that gay marriage will be illegal, and that was a big hot button issue. And so it's almost like they swayed the whole membership of the church to go against gay marriage, and that took years to overturn. That took almost 10 years, I feel like, to really evolve past that. And even still, I'm sure they're not too keen on gay marriage, but we're kind of past all that with
Yeah,
2013 and beyond going
yeah,
going forward.
yeah. It's, do you think your life do you feel your life's gotten better since that you're out in both ways, of
Yeah,
course.
I think I'm yeah, I think I'm happier. So things that I would be depressed about before were, oh, will I ever find somebody to love? Or am I really being who I truly am? That would kind of bring me down emotionally. So
Yeah,
the day to day life, I feel much more joy because I'm making decisions that make me happy.
could you explain about that more if you would?
So when you're in the church and they're like, oh, you can't date boys and you can't, if you're a boy, you can't date boys and you can't get married to a boy. And then I was like, well, I guess I could just be single my whole life. Then my brain would think, oh, but that's really lonely to be single. And so
Yeah,
when you leave the church and you're like, oh, I can date boys if I want to, I can marry a man if I want to. Okay, well,
yeah,
that feels better. So it's just different emotional manipulations where they're like, you can't do this, you can't do that. When you leave
yeah,
the church and you realize, oh, I can make that choice for myself, there's a bit more freedom in that feeling. and then it does cause you to at least have more of an
Yeah.
opportunity to be happy.
So you're saying you're more kind of yourself now that time's kind of passed. And,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to anyone who's currently leaving the Mormon Church?
I guess be strong and realize that it might be really hard to make that transition. But on the flip side, it does get easier. It's that whole campaign of people coming out of the closet in general, where people who have come out of the closet and they're living their life in a true, authentic manner, they say it gets better. It's the same for leaving the church. It does get better, even if it doesn't feel like that right now.
Are there other than talking to me about it, do you struggle with talking to anybody around the world, like about like your past as a Mormon?
What's interesting is I think a lot of people, maybe when they're ashamed of something, it could be hard to talk about. But the minute like I flipped the switch, like I got kicked out of school when I was much younger, and I flipped a switch that was like, "Oh, I'm going to be honest about that." Like some people would be ashamed of that and be like, "I don't want to tell people I got kicked out of school." But then if they ask me, even if it was like 5 minutes after I got kicked out, like, "Did you get kicked out of school?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. Yeah, for this reason, because I was gay." And so then it wasn't as hard for me after I decided that, oh, I'll just be honest about it. And so for me, it was immediate. I know that's not necessarily average or normal. That some people, it's a transitional time of, oh, I'm ashamed to even talk about this. This is a lot of grief that I've been through and trauma. I don't want to talk about it. But the minute I experienced the trauma and I was like, this is what's happening, I was like,
Mhm.
I'll tell you. I'll tell anyone. I'll tell my friends, family, the internet. I don't care. But I think that's a healthier attitude, at least for me. I don't know if it's healthy for everybody, but to just come out and say how you feel and say the truth of what happened to you, I think that's powerful. I think it's good. Don't hide it. And so, even though other people might have been embarrassed for me, I was like, no, I got kicked out of school for being gay. I'm leaving the church for these reasons. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, anyways, last two questions. Are there any concepts about the Mormon Church or ex-Mormons that you would like to address to anyone out in the world watching?
Yes, I do. There is a concept of people who are still in the church kind of pointing a finger to people who have left the church, and they're like, ah, why do you have to keep bringing up the church if you've left? Like, get over it. They're like, you can leave the church, but you can't even leave the church alone. And what I have to say about that is, well, duh, because you told us our whole lives that the church is so important and it's the biggest thing about our lives. And then if we get kicked out or we leave, you're like, now you can't talk about it. No, that's not how it works. It was a big part of our lives. And so we're still somewhat interested in it. Like, at least from the sidelines, I'm still interested if the church is like, all right, now we like gay marriage, even though they have not said that. But, we would be listening
Yeah.
for that. Oh, are they going to say they like it now? What's going on? But usually it's more of the same. We keep hearing, now don't be gay. We love our gay brothers and sisters, but don't be gay. So we're kind of listening from the background, and people in the church are like, why do you care? Why do you even care? Just let it be. And it's like, well, you didn't let me be, so I'm still going to be involved even if it's outside of the church. So yeah, that's the fallacy of, well, you once you leave the church, you just need to leave it alone. No, I mean, they told us to be involved, and so we're going to stay involved even if we're ex-Mormon now. So that's the one thing.
So it's basically you're in my it's basically you can't take the city out of someone, but you can you're still in the. It's kind of like that. Like,
It is. Yeah. Like if you're born in New York City, you can't take the New York City out of the
Yeah,
person.
yeah. Anyway, last question. What legacy? Are there any? Is there a legacy that you do want to leave in the entertainment business?
Oh yeah, that's great. I think for myself, I've thought about this a lot. Some of the reason why you would want to be a performer in general is to make yourself feel good while you're performing.
Hmm.
But then the second part is to to help other people feel good about the performance or feel something. Because some plays aren't all happy daffodils and roses. Some plays are like,
Yeah.
hey, you need to feel sad or you need to feel angry about this situation. So I think just sharing emotions and sharing your emotional well being, good, bad, ugly, just your emotional truth with the audience, that's such an important part. So I think the legacy I would want to leave, and even in comedy, so like even if I'm doing an improv show, I want to leave the audience feeling excited with laughter or seeing something pretty hilarious that they can go home and tell their friends about. So it it is making yourself feel good being on the stage and performing, but then the second part is you do want others to feel good. Like it should be a
Yeah.
two-way street. You're like, "Hey, I love being on stage, but I love performing for you guys out there because you're feeling emotions and you're feeling inspired." And it yeah, the inspiration
Hmm.
is something that I want to pass on. So if there is a legacy, it would be to help others feel what they need to feel in that moment and to be inspired to do what they need to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for coming on. Glad to talk about your life as an ex-Mormon. It was very interesting to talk about.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this has been a good conversation.
Yeah. I if you don't mind, I need a good thumbnail. Could you freeze for like 5 seconds and like put your thumb up? I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.